I spent $320 on a guy whose last name I didn't even know. And that number ended up changing my life more than any promotion I ever chased. It wasn't a huge, heroic moment. There was no dramatic music, no thank you speech, no slow clap from the office. It was a Tuesday night in a beige building with flickering lights and a broken coffee machine, the kind of place where everyone knows exactly how much they make and exactly how replaceable they are. I'd been at that company for 6 years, mid-level, reliable, boring. My job title sounded more important than it was, operations coordinator. In reality, I was the guy who made sure other people's messes didn't blow deadlines. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't happy either. Think of a person clinging to a life raft they secretly hate because at least it floats. That was me. Then they brought him in. His name was Daniel. That's all HR gave us at the Monday morning stand-up. This is Daniel. He'll be helping out on the logistics side for a while. No last name, no background, no, everyone say hi. Just a loose gesture in his direction and then back to the spreadsheet on the projector. He looked out of place. Not in a flashy way. If anything, he blended in too much. Dark blue shirt, buttoned all the way up. Sleeves rolled twice like he'd copied it from a magazine, but didn't quite believe he had the right to wear it. The kind of cheap black slacks you buy when you're trying to look professional on a Walmart budget. Decent shoes, but worn at the edges. Older than me by maybe 10 years. Gray at his temples. Calm face, but the kind of calm you see in people who've had to be calm, not the ones born that way. When he smiled, it didn't hit his eyes all the way, and people clocked him immediately. You learn to read an office fast if you want to survive. Our manager, Simon, did the usual fake enthusiasm when he introduced him, then parked Daniel at the spare desk closest to the printer, the loud one that shook when it jammed. We all know that desk. That's the your temporary desk. "Welcome to the zoo," my coworker Lauren whispered to him when Simon walked away. He chuckled politely and started logging in. I watched him out of the corner of my eye while I pretended to care about my inbox. Most new people did the same routine, over-explaining their experience, asking too many questions, trying too hard to impress. Daniel did none of that. He listened. He read. He wrote notes by hand in a battered notebook like he was studying us. By the end of the first day, he'd learned everyone's name, but hardly said anything about himself. By the end of the first week, the office had made up its mind about him. Probably couldn't keep a job. Another charity hire. You know how HR is about diversity this quarter. He's too old to be temp. That's weird, right? They didn't say it to his face, obviously, just in the kitchen or on smoke breaks, or in Slack DMs with the safe people. The same way they talked about everyone who didn't fit exactly into their little hierarchy. Simon was the worst. He had that management style that lives somewhere between cool older brother and guy who would absolutely throw you under a bus in a performance review. Second week, I walked into the break room just in time to hear Simon say, "So what did you do before this, Daniel? Or are we not allowed to ask about parole conditions in this state?" People laughed, not because it was funny, but because he was the one who signed their evaluations. Daniel smiled, small and tired. "A bit of everything," he said. "Mostly operations. Logistics, nothing glamorous." "Nothing glamorous here, either," Simon said. "Just don't touch anything expensive." More laughter. I rinsed my mug and said nothing. That was kind of my thing back then. Keeping my head down, convincing myself silence was neutrality and not cowardice. The day with the $320 started like any other bad Tuesday. Rain, traffic, inbox full of quick questions that weren't quick. Simon scheduled a 4:30 touch base. He absolutely could have put in an email. I ate a vending machine lunch at my desk and called it balanced. Around 6, most people had filtered out. It was that quiet hour where the office hum drops a level and the cleaning crew start rolling their carts down the hall. I stayed late to finish a shipment schedule Simon wanted before tomorrow's stand-up, which meant before I remember it exists. Daniel was still there too. He'd been assigned some nightmare backlog cleanup project and was slowly untangling it the way patient people untangle necklaces, one knot at a time. No drama, just method. "Hey, you heading out soon?" I asked him on my way to refill my water. "In a bit," he said without looking up. "Just need to send a couple of things." I nodded and kept walking. That's when I heard it. Not a shout. Just a voice in the small glass conference room at the end of the hall. We used it as an overflow space when all the real rooms were booked. The door was mostly closed, but not all the way. The lights were on. Someone inside was talking low, the kind of low where every word is made of sandpaper. "No, I know. I know they won't hold it forever. That's why I'm calling." I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Office walls just aren't as soundproof as people pretend they are. "I'm telling you, I get paid Friday. I can cover the rest on Friday. I just don't have 320 right now. Not today." I froze just past the door. There was a pause on the other end of his call. Then he sighed, that long exhale that sounds like defeat and courtesy at the same time. "I understand. Yeah, I get it. If you have to cancel, you have to cancel." "No, I don't have anyone else I can ask." Another pause. "My credit card is maxed. Yes, I've checked. Twice." He let out a short, humorless laugh at something they said. "Yeah, I know it's not your fault. I'm not mad at you. I just... Okay. Thank you for trying." I shifted just enough to see him through the inch of glass. Daniel, phone pressed to his ear, one hand on the table, knuckles white. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even raising his voice, but his whole body looked like someone had pulled the plug on him. "Just so I understand," he said quietly, "if I don't pay the $320 today, they'll cancel the order and she won't get the medication? There's no partial option? No, I can't drive down there. I don't have..." He stopped himself, swallowed. "Yeah, okay. Please, just send me the statement. I'll figure it out, somehow." He hung up slowly, set the phone down, and pressed his fingers against his eyes for a second. I didn't move. It felt wrong to barge in and pretend I hadn't heard. It felt worse to walk away. He stayed like that for a long moment, then straightened, rolled his shoulders back, and walked out of the room, like he'd just been checking sports scores. When he saw me in the hallway, he gave a little nod. "Burning the late oil too?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "You know how it is." He smiled, that same controlled, half-present smile. "Yeah, I know." And that was it. He went back to his rattling printer desk. I went back to mine. But the conversation in that room wouldn't get out of my head. 320. It's not nothing. Not when you're counting every grocery bill and gas tank. But it's also not a year's tuition or a car. It's the kind of number that ruins a month, not a life. The kind of number where you think, if I had it, I'd help. And then say, well, I don't, and move on. Only I did have it. Not lying around in a drawer habit, but I had savings. A small, pathetic adult safety net I'd been building for dentist emergencies and broken transmissions. I could move 320 and not starve. It would sting, but the lights would stay on. And someone somewhere was about to lose medication. Someone in his life close enough that he was taking calls about it from an empty conference room at 6:30 p.m. I stared at my screen. The shipment schedule wasn't going anywhere. I opened a new tab. It wasn't hard to figure out what company he'd been talking to. Our town only had 2 major specialty pharmacies, and one of them had a payment portal that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2009. He'd left the browser window open in the conference room. When I walked by to check the thermostat, I saw the logo in the corner. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. Boundaries, privacy, all that. I told myself I was just confirming. That's the thing about crossing a line. You almost never admit that's what you're doing in the moment. 2 minutes of searching and I found the pay balance page. It asked for a patient ID, last name, and amount. He'd said the amount out loud. The ID was in the email open on the screen. The last name? Well, the top corner of his phone case had a little hospital sticker with D. Morales partially visible. Sloppy, maybe, but he didn't strike me as a guy who expected anyone to be looking that closely. I went back to my desk, sat down, and stared at the cursor for a long time. This is stupid, I thought. You don't know him. You don't know if this is real. You don't even know who the medication is for. It could be a scam. It could be his own bad planning. It's not your job to fix everybody's life. Then underneath that, quieter. It's $320, and you'll wake up tomorrow, knowing you could have done something and didn't. I wish I could say I wrestled with it for hours, but I didn't. I entered the patient ID, typed Morales, and filled in 320 and when it asked for my name, I put anonymous. When it demanded an email, I used the junk Gmail address I always used for spam. I routed it from my personal account, not the joint one. I put in my card number and waited for the loading circle to finish spinning. Payment processed. A little green check mark that looked way too cheerful for what it represented. My heart was beating faster than it had any right to. I closed the browser, cleared the history on that machine out of habit, and went back to my desk. My hands shook a little when I picked up my mug. 10 minutes later, as I packed my bag, I heard the conference room chair scrape back again. Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and froze. There was a beat of silence. Then he whispered, "No way." He tapped the screen, read something, read it again. I couldn't see his face fully from where I was, just the outline of his shoulders. But I watched them sag in this weird mix of relief and disbelief. Hi, yes, this is Daniel Morales," he said, dialing out. I just got a notification that the balance was paid. No, I didn't make a payment. I thought you canceled it. Pause. So it's covered? Completely? There's no hold? You're sure? Another pause. Okay, thank you. Thanks. He hung up and sat down heavily, one hand on the back of his neck. For the first time since he'd started, I saw his face without that careful, quiet expression. He looked open, raw, human. "Whoever you are," he said softly to the empty room. "Thank you. You have no idea what you just did." I slipped my laptop into my bag and pretended I hadn't heard. On the way out, I passed the glass. He glanced up, caught my eye, and offered me a small, worn-out smile, like he was trying to be polite to a stranger on a bus. "Night, Grant," he said. "Night," I answered. My throat felt tight. "See you tomorrow." I walked to my car in the rain with $320 fewer to my name and told myself it was just a one-time thing, a decent thing maybe, a small good deed in a place that didn't have many. I had no idea that by the time tomorrow came and went, that little green checkmark on a payment screen had already started a chain of events that would burn my whole boring, safe life down to the studs. I didn't expect anything the next morning. Not a thank you, not a knowing look, nothing. And for the first couple of hours, that's exactly what I got. Daniel walked in at 8:03, same quiet step, same worn briefcase, same polite nods to the early birds. If he knew anything, he didn't show it. He just sat down at that rattling printer desk and got to work like the previous night hadn't happened at all. But that was just the beginning. Around 10, the jokes started. Harmless at first. The kind of office humor people use to test if cruelty will get a laugh. Lauren said, "Hey, can someone cover my lunch? Maybe I'll get a mysterious donation, too." People snickered. Someone else chimed in, "Check your notifications, Morales. Maybe the Tooth Fairy's doing direct deposits now." Daniel smiled, that same soft, careful smile. But I saw the way he tightened his jaw. I kept my eyes on my monitor. During our 11 a.m. stand-up, Simon took it further. He clapped his hands together loudly to get everyone's attention and said, "So before we dive into today's goals, I hear we've got a very charitable office. Very heartwarming." People laughed on cue. Simon paced, pretending to read something on his tablet. "Just a reminder that we come here to work, not run GoFundMe campaigns in the shadows. If anyone's struggling with basic adult responsibilities, well, maybe they should reconsider whether this job is the right fit." He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't have to. The whole room did it for him. I felt something flare in my chest. Anger, maybe, or shame. I'm still not sure. But it wasn't heroic. It was small and hot and trapped under my ribs. Daniel cleared his throat. It wasn't a campaign. It was a mistake on the pharmacy's side. It's sorted. Simon raised an eyebrow. Oh, good. Wouldn't want the rest of us to feel obligated to play rescue rangers. One guy in the back snorted. I hated myself a little for not saying anything. When the meeting ended, Daniel went straight back to work, head down. I followed him with my eyes. He had this way of holding himself. Straight spine, squared shoulders, like someone who learned long ago that showing discomfort only paints a target on your back. I recognized it because I'd done that posture for years. Around lunch, he tried to talk to me. He hovered beside my desk, cleared his throat, tapped his notebook once. Hey, Grant? Yeah? Did you stay late yesterday? My stomach tightened. He wasn't stupid. He was testing the waters. I did, I said evenly. Shipment schedule stuff. Why? He shook his head, backing off immediately. No reason, just wondered. I nodded, pretending to read an email I wasn't reading. He left after a few seconds. He didn't ask again, and I told myself that was good. Clean. Safe. Better for both of us. But the universe apparently disagreed, because 2 days later, Simon called me into his office. He didn't offer me a seat. That's how I knew something was off. Simon leaned against his desk with his arms crossed, doing that disappointed dad expression he used right before giving someone a terrible performance review. I heard something unusual, he began. I didn't flinch. About what? About you inserting yourself into your coworkers' financial issues? My mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, keeping my tone level. Simon gave me that smug little smirk he always saved for moments when he thought he'd caught someone. Come on, Grant. Someone paid Morales' little bill. Morales didn't. And you're the only one who stayed late enough to get access to the terminals. He didn't know anything for certain. That was obvious. He was guessing. But guessing was enough. I didn't access anyone's terminals, I said. It wasn't a lie. He laughed. Please. I know you, Grant. You're a fixer, a soft touch. You want people to like you. And I'm sure it made you feel like some kind of hero. He stepped closer. Here's the problem. You created dependency, drama, distraction, and we don't need that here. I stared at him. Are you seriously reprimanding me for helping someone outside of work hours? You helped within work property, with work systems, with company resources. You see the issue? That's a stretch, I said. A big one. He shrugged. Maybe. But management is allowed to stretch. Preventative action, Grant. Keeps things clean. I exhaled slowly. So what action are you taking? Simon reached for a folder on his desk and dropped it in front of me. Documented warning, he said, and I'm adjusting your monthly performance metric. No bonus eligibility this cycle. I felt heat crawl up my neck. You're punishing me for something you can't even prove I did. He smiled. See, that's the thing. I don't need proof. I need order. I opened my mouth and snapped it shut again, because anything I said next would make it worse. He watched me with a kind of lazy triumph. You're a good worker, Grant. Too good to lose. But don't make me babysit your savior complex, he said. Moral of the story? Let people solve their own problems. He dismissed me with a flick of his hand. When I stepped out, Daniel was walking by with a stack of printouts. He paused when he saw my face, caught something in it, but didn't say a word. I went back to my desk and sat down slowly, like the air was thicker than usual. My hands shook so badly I had to lace them together under the table. $320. That's what this was about. 320. It shouldn't have mattered that much, but it did. And the deeper unfairness, the thing that sat in my throat like a stone, was that I couldn't even tell Daniel what had just happened without betraying the one boundary I'd tried to keep. Anonymity. So I swallowed it. Swallowed the anger. Swallowed the humiliation. Swallowed the regret. That night, When I left the office, his desk was empty. His notebook was gone. His mug was washed and drying on the rack. His login screen was already disabled. Simon didn't mention him the next day. Nobody did. Daniel Morales had vanished from the building like he'd never been there, leaving behind nothing but a few cheap pens, a rickety desk, and the echo of a bill I shouldn't have paid. I told myself it was over. A weird chapter, a mistake, something I'd forget eventually. But I didn't know it yet. That decision would cost them everything. I didn't think about Daniel for weeks, or that's not true. I tried not to think about him, tried to bury the whole mess under deadlines and spreadsheets, and the kind of quiet self-loathing you get when you're punished for doing something decent. But then the company started acting strange. At first it was tiny things, things only people like me noticed, the ones who lived in the cracks between departments. HR suddenly booked conference rooms for internal compliance alignment. Finance stopped approving purchases without 3 layers of signatures. Simon started wearing ties. Simon never wore ties. And then came the email. Mandatory all-hands meeting. Friday 10 a.m. Attendance required. No exceptions. People spent the whole week speculating. Layoffs, merger, restructuring. Someone joked we were getting bought by Amazon. Someone else said we were being audited for labor violations. The anxiety in the office was thick enough to taste. By Thursday, Simon was sweating through his dress shirts. I caught him snapping at Lauren for asking a normal question. Then 5 minutes later, laughing too loudly at a joke she didn't even finish telling. He'd swing from panic to fake charm to panic again. On Friday morning, he showed up early, in a suit, a real one, with cufflinks. I'd never seen him look so desperate to appear important. "Big day," he said to me with a forced grin. "Let's all be on our best behavior, yeah?" "Sure," I said. He clapped my shoulder like we were teammates. His hand shook. That was the first sign. The second came at 9:55, when half the executive staff walked into the building at once. People we only saw in yearly newsletters or framed photos in the lobby. But the third sign, that was the one that hit me like cold water. At exactly 10:01 a.m., the conference room doors closed, and someone I never expected to see again stepped up to the front of the room. Daniel. Except it wasn't the Daniel I knew. No rattling desk, no cheap slacks, no worn-out notebook. He stood at the front wearing a charcoal suit, tailored so cleanly it almost looked like armor. Crisp shirt, subtle gold tie clasp, hair combed back. He didn't look older, just sharper, harder, fully awake. His posture wasn't cautious anymore. He stood like a man used to being listened to. The room went silent in 2 seconds flat. Simon's face drained of color. He blinked once, twice, like his brain couldn't reconcile the temp he mocked with the man in front of him. A woman from the executive team stepped forward. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, for the past quarter, we've been conducting a culture audit and operational review. Today's meeting is to share findings and next steps." People shifted nervously. "And," she continued, "to formally reintroduce someone many of you have already met." She turned to Daniel with a smile. "This is Mr. Daniel R. Morales, co-founder, principal partner, and majority shareholder." The room went dead still. No breathing, no whispers, just a collective internal scream. My heart jumped into my throat. The air felt electrified. I heard someone whisper, "Holy sh..." and then cut themselves off. Daniel stepped forward, hands clasped lightly in front of him. "Thank you," he said. His voice was steady, low, calm, not small anymore, not cautious, just real. I worked here under an entry-level operational role because I wanted to see the culture from the ground floor, not the reports, not the presentations, the truth. If eyes could burn, Simon would have been ash. Daniel continued. "In that time, I saw a team with potential, some incredible work ethic, people who care." He paused. "And people who don't." A ripple went through the room. I saw employees humiliated in front of peers. I saw personal hardships mocked. I saw leadership undermine morale and punish empathy. I saw exactly who this company relies on and who it endangers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word landed like a weight. Simon suddenly looked much smaller in his perfect tie and cufflinks. He tried to smile, but it was the smile of a man watching his own house burn down. And, Daniel said, I saw something else. I saw a culture where fear keeps people silent, where doing the bare minimum is safer than doing the right thing. He scanned the room. His eyes passed over people one by one. Lauren, the analysts, the quiet interns, the sales guys trying not to sweat through their shirts. And then they landed on me, just for a second. Not long enough for anyone else to notice, long enough for me to feel my stomach drop. I'd like to address some specific incidents, he said, especially those involving managerial misconduct. Simon rose from his chair so fast it scraped loudly. If I could just... No, Daniel said gently. You've done enough speaking. The executives didn't laugh, but a few employees did, softly, almost involuntarily. Daniel lifted a folder. In the past 6 weeks, we documented unapproved alterations to employee KPIs, retaliation for non-workplace activities, verbal harassment, intimidation, and inappropriate personal commentary, Simon stammered. None of that is substantiated. We have dates, Daniel said, times, witnesses, screenshots, and audio. Silence, actual pure silence. People looked around in shock. A few mouths hung open. Someone in the back muttered, "Holy shit," under their breath. Daniel closed the folder. As of today, Mr. Simon Whitaker is relieved of his managerial duties. A collective exhale filled the room like wind. Simon stood frozen, red, then pale, then red again. You can't, he sputtered. A woman from HR touched his arm. We'll speak outside. No, this is ridiculous, Grant. Tell them... My blood went cold. He pointed at me. He's the one. He's the one who paid that bill. He created the drama. Daniel held up a hand. That incident, he said calmly, is not why Simon is being removed. He looked at me. Directly. Not accusing. Not sympathetic. Just knowing. That incident, he continued, is the only part of this story that reflects well on any of you. Another quiet ripple across the room. And, he added, the only thing that kept me from shutting down this branch entirely. The room erupted. Whispers, sharp intakes of breath, frantic side glances. Some people looked at me. Most looked terrified. Simon looked like he might faint. The executives thanked everyone and began outlining next steps. Interim managers, cultural rehabilitation, retention support. But I barely heard any of it, because as people filed out, Daniel walked directly toward me. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. When he reached me, he said quietly, "Stay for a minute." And then he kept walking, expecting me to follow. And as stunned as I was, I did. Because in that moment, with Simon gone, with the room buzzing, with every assumption about Daniel shattered, I realized something. I hadn't just paid off a stranger's emergency bill. I had stepped directly into the spotlight of a man with the power to rewrite my entire life. And he wasn't done. Daniel didn't take me to an office. He didn't take me to a conference room either. He walked straight to the far end of the hallway, the one with the frosted glass and the door that only executives ever used. He opened it without hesitation and gestured for me to enter. I'd never been in that room before. It didn't even look like it belonged to our building. Quiet, clean, a long table of dark wood, a window overlooking the city skyline instead of the parking lot, water pitchers that weren't plastic. Daniel closed the door behind us, loosened his tie slightly, and leaned against the table, like the weight of the last hour finally settled on him. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, calmly, directly, with none of the distance he'd had as the temp. "You knew who I was?" he asked. I shook my head instantly. "No, not even close." "Good," he exhaled softly, "because I needed someone to look at me without knowing." He motioned for me to sit. I did. My palms were sweating. "When I worked downstairs," he said, "I wasn't watching for talent. The board already tracks that on paper. I was looking for something else." He tapped his fingers lightly on the table. "Character, decency, the things you can't measure in a system." I swallowed. I wasn't trying to make a statement. "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "You weren't the only one who heard me that night in the conference room," he said quietly. "Others did too. I saw them look away, pretend, laugh later. You were the only one who didn't turn it into gossip. You were the only one who didn't try to buy my gratitude." "I didn't expect anything," I said. He turned back to me, expression steady. "That," he said, "is exactly why I'm talking to you now." He sat across from me, rested his arms on the table, and leaned in slightly. "What you did wasn't about money," he said. "It was about humanity. $320 bought medication, but the act behind it? That told me exactly who you are." I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't know how to respond without sounding defensive or embarrassed. Daniel continued, voice calm but firm. "When I started this company, I promised myself I'd never lose touch with the people who do the real work. Somewhere along the line, we failed at that, miserably, and Simon wasn't the only problem." He folded his hands. "I want to fix that, and I need people who understand what it feels like to be on the lower rungs. People who see what's broken, even when the spreadsheets say everything is fine." He looked me dead in the eyes. "I want you on the internal development team. Culture, workflow, employee well-being. A role where you can actually change things, where your instincts matter." My breath caught. "That's a big step," I said quietly. "It is," he agreed. "And it's yours if you want it." The room felt too small for a moment, too still. I wasn't getting a mansion. I wasn't getting a miracle. I wasn't suddenly rich or powerful. But for the first time in years, I felt something unclench in my chest. "Why me?" I asked. He smiled, the real smile I hadn't seen downstairs. "Because when no one was watching," he said, "you chose to be decent." 3 months later, my life didn't look glamorous. It looked livable. I had an office with a door, not a fancy one, but a door that closed. I had a manager who listened more than he talked. My days weren't easy, but they weren't suffocating anymore. People came to me with problems I could actually help solve instead of excuses to protect Simon's ego. My salary didn't skyrocket, but it stabilized. I stopped waking up with that gut-tight anxiety that maybe today was the day everything fell apart. The office felt different too. Not magically better, but quieter, kinder around the edges, like the air wasn't as heavy. And every so often I'd see Daniel in a meeting or passing through the building. He didn't hide in plain clothes anymore. He wasn't pretending to be someone else. But whenever he saw me, he'd nod in this small way. Not a greeting, not a thank you. Just acknowledgement. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. But then one afternoon, while reviewing onboarding feedback, I saw something in an internal report. A note attached to an anonymized transaction record. The pharmacy bill. $320. Covered anonymously by G. Do not flag. Do not reimburse. Document privately. Character indicator. I stared at that line for a long time. Not because I felt proud. Not because anyone would ever see it. But because someone had seen the one thing I thought would disappear with the rain that night. Someone remembered. Quietly. Permanently. On a Thursday evening, as I packed up for the night, Daniel passed my doorway. He paused. "Heading out?" "Yeah," I said. "Long day." He nodded. "You're doing good work." I smiled a little. "Trying." "That's enough," he said, and turned to go. Then stopped. "Grant?" "Yeah?" He looked at me, not as a temp, not as a boss, but as a person. I kept the original pharmacy invoice, he said, not because of the money, because sometimes the smallest choices reveal the biggest truths. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. He smiled once, briefly, and left. I walked out of the building into the cool evening air, breathing easier than I had in a long time. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't special. I wasn't trying to change anyone's life. All I did was try to keep someone else's world from collapsing on a night when mine felt just as fragile. And somehow, quietly, improbably, that small choice had rearranged the shape of my own life. Not dramatically, not instantly, but undeniably. Sometimes the world doesn't reward you loudly. Sometimes it doesn't reward you at all. But sometimes, on rare, quiet days, it pays you back in the only currency that really matters, a life that finally feels like yours.